would you please try, you have the floor. Would you please make sure that you press the mic on and camera on? It must turn into red. Like you joined successfully this morning, Honorable Minister.
What is his name? I can check whether we are recorded. His name? Can you reply to the visible? Which country? I will check that.
We still haven't managed to get Google and Alibaba. If you are connected, yes, Ambassador Ted Osius, you have the floor.
Here, thank you very much.
Yes, we can hear you and see you very clearly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Honorable Minister of Maldives, would you please, shall we try one more time? Oh, Alibaba is here. Mr. Sami Farhad, you have the floor. You may see the mic and camera buttons, which must be in red. Can you just press that? And they will turn into blue. Mr. Farhad? Mr. Farhad, would you please kindly check whether you have joined the session using the Google Chrome and have given the access to Kudo to access your microphone and camera? And once you change the setup, please refresh the page. So in the meantime, I'll move on to Honorable Minister of Maldives. Honorable Minister, you have the floor. We still do not see you. Please join the session using Google Chrome. And when you do so, and if you haven't done that already, please click on the padlock icon to the left of the web address and see whether you have given access on camera and microphone. You should allow them to access it. And then you can refresh your browsers. Maybe we try one more time with Alibaba, if you are ready. Yes, you have the floor. Yes. Just, yes, Mr. Farhad.
Sami Farhad. There's a bit of a delay, but I hope everyone can see and hear me well now.
Yeah, we can see you and hear you very well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, now let's try one more time. Maldives, if you have allowed the camera and microphone access, please refresh. Yes, oh, I think you're coming. Just 1 second.
Yeah, finally.
Yes, Honorable Minister, we can see you. I'm very happy.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you very clearly, Honorable Minister. Thank you.
But I can't hear you.
You can hear us? Can you hear us?
I can't hear you.
Oh.
From Secretary, can you hear me? But I cannot hear. Can you speak, please?
We can hear you loud and clear.
Yeah.
You cannot hear us.
Dia pun ada ni. 1 second.
Sure.
Let me check.
Gentlemen, a very warm welcome to ESCAP and to the Regional Conversation Series on Building Back Better. Again, this is the first of the series in conjunction of the commemoration of the 75th anniversary of the United Nations. That's first. And second, also, the objective is to provide an inclusive platform, member states, all stakeholders, to share and mobilize insights, best practice lessons learned experience through strengthened partnership and energized coalition among all of us. And the topic of the sixth series comprises of today, this is the first of the sixth series, is today would cover technology ICT. The second one would be on the 31st of August this month, which is on financing for development, which also support the global process, global initiative on this particular topic, financing for development, especially in the era of COVID-19. And then on first week of September is climate change and air pollution in conjunction of International Day of a Blue Sky. And then on October or September, the topic on supply chain and connectivity. Also still in October, social protection, and the last one in October, again to culminate, to commemorate the 75th anniversary of UN is how all of us shape our future together, to build the resilience and the green recovery. These thematic areas embody the significance of a diverse set of policy priorities that can shape our future in the post-COVID-19 recovery plan. at the outset, I would like to reiterate some of the key focus areas and policies responses for today's further discussion, which I already shared at the opening of the third session of the committee this morning on information and communication technology, science, technology, and innovation. So 3 focus areas that I would like to reiterate again, which will be very important in us understanding the theme of today's regional conversation. Let me just quickly, again, refresh our memory on these 3 focus areas. First is on the supply side. How to provide safe, inclusive, affordable, and reliable this fast speed internet access for all, in which our region definitely needs to build the digital infrastructure to leverage further, to transform this digitalization further. Second, on the demand side, of course, we recognize the importance of investing in digital literacy. Also very important, not only the supply, but the demand side, and improving the development of internet, the content, as well as the services for all generations, young and old. Third, to address both supply and demand aspects of this digital divide. Of course, government needs to lead this, as well as in the regional policy coordination sphere and multi-stakeholder partnership. And then in terms of the 3 policy proposals that I see, that I hope that can be further discussed during this conversation, again, 3 that I see hopefully can be picked up further in the discussion. First is how to accelerate and scale up the preparation for we have this Asia-Pacific Information Superhighway, the implementation, especially the implementation and all these components, and how to develop and achieve seamless regional broadband networks in terms of improved affordability, reliance, resilience, and coverage. Second, to ensure that innovations are accessible and affordable for all as a matter of one of the policy priority. And third, of course, we understand the importance of research, training, advisory services for policymakers in this field, the ICT and STI, and leverage that further for further collaboration. So with that, again, I would like to thank especially my sincerest appreciation and thanks to Dr. Chaki Mukai, His Excellency Mr. Mohammed Malik Jamal, His Excellency Ambassador Ted Osius, Mr. Sami Farhad, and certainly my dear colleagues, USG SG Special Advisor, Mr. Fabrizio Oschal. Again, with that, thank you very much for your participation, your engagement, your contribution in this regional conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Alice Jabana, for framing the conversation we will be having today and for outlining the possible policy responses and actions. I would now like to request the United Nations Under-Secretary General, Mr. Fabrizio Hochschild, to deliver his statement. Mr. Hochschild is Special Advisor to the Secretary General of the UN on the preparations for the commemoration of the UN 75th anniversary, and he has also coordinated the UN Secretary General's roadmap for digital cooperation. Over to you, Mr. Hochschild.
Excellencies, distinguished speakers, ladies and gentlemen. It's an honor to be among you and have the opportunity to deliver a few brief opening remarks at this inaugural regional conversation in the series Building Back Better that has been convened by the Executive Secretary, my dear and much admired colleague, Ms. Hamida Salsia Alice Chabana. I think these conversations are extremely timely, and I think beginning with digital cooperation makes a lot of sense. Many feel globally that COVID has accelerated us towards a pivot point where we are at the dawn of a new era marked precisely by the transformative impact of these new technologies. And it was very much in that spirit that the General Assembly decided last year to mark this, the 75th anniversary of the UN, with debates not around all the achievements that the UN has succeeded in bringing about over the 75 years, but rather a forward-looking debate on what are the challenges that are emerging now, what are our hopes for the future, and how do we need to adapt our international organizations to better deliver on our hopes for the future. And against that backdrop, the Secretary General decided to launch the largest, most comprehensive conversation ever on how peoples across the world see the future. What is the future they want? What do they most fear in terms of global developments? And what are their expectations of international cooperation? Well, to date, 8 months into this exercise, we've reached over 500,000 people in all countries and heard their opinions. We'll present the results on the 21st of September, but we'd like to hear from even more people and hope you can help with the outreach around our UN 75 initiative so we can better adapt our institution to meet future challenges in the spirit of serving we the peoples. And with that, let me just conclude by expressing my hope that your conversations today will help inspire multi-stakeholder actions and advocate solutions for a digitally transformed world that is more inclusive and where we overcome the digital divide which threatens to become the new face of inequality. So best of luck in your conversations and warm greetings to you from New York.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hochschild, for your remarks. And in line with we the peoples and bringing the conversation to the level of the people, we have prepared a very short video that represents technology perspectives from different stakeholders. So if we could please play that introductory video.
The COVID-19 pandemic has created unprecedented changes to the way we lead our lives, from trivial things like working from home and hosting virtual events. Digital connectivity plays a critical role in supporting the Sustainable Development Goals. It has also helped alleviate the COVID-19 crisis in a collective and innovative way, for example, by providing on-demand data and statistics to aid in COVID-19 tracking and monitoring.
I'm Kisalalina Pasana from the Papua New Guinea National Weather Service. As one of the least developed countries in the Asia Pacific, our people need faster and cheaper internet for achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, and affordable and accessible internet connectivity for our children, schools and communities. For example, the current situation under the COVID-19 pandemic.
In 2015, with a vision to transform India into a knowledge-based economy and a digitally empowered society, the Government of India embarked upon the Digital India program to ensure digital access, digital inclusion, and digital empowerment of the people of India.
Hi, my name is Risa. I am a young engineer in Lapan, Indonesia. I thank ESCAP and India for sponsoring my master's degree in Global Navigation Satellite System at Center for Space Science and Technology Education in India from 2019-2020.
Risa is now an engineer at Lapan Hub COVID-19 and handles day-to-day missions of satellite operations and keeps track of in-orbit satellite performance. Lapan Hub COVID-19 is the portal of remote sensing applications and the geospatial information system to analyze the potential risks of COVID-19 in a region.
In Thailand, GISA has been supporting our government by using space technologies and applications to support our policymakers with the COVID-19 pandemic.
The United Nations and all countries around the world are working to help build our world back better. Cooperation among countries across sectors and stakeholders will be critical to accelerate digital connectivity and better use technology to achieve the future we want.
I'm ready to fly into space. No, I want to go to space. Bye bye.
Okay, thank you. So with that perspective firmly on the future and the future we want and the future for the younger generations, let us start our panel discussion. So I think we are very fortunate today to have speakers represented on this panel that encompass a very extensive range of experiences and depth of expertise. We have a minister, we have pioneers and leaders in space science, digital innovation, and international cooperation. And the conversation will be structured around a set of questions which I will address to each of our speakers as we move forward. The only request at this point I would have is that since we have only 45 minutes, I would kindly request that the interventions be limited to a maximum of 10 minutes. And then, of course, after the presentations, we will open the floor for a question and answer session. So I'd like to start off by venturing not only into the future, but venturing beyond our planet. And we are very honored today to have with us Dr. Chiaki Mukai. Dr. Mukai is a physician, and she's also the first female astronaut of Japan to travel in space. Dr. Mukai, having such an exceptional experience and expertise, when you look down at Earth from space, our blue planet must have appeared so beautiful. But as we all know, from the ground level, it is a fragile planet. Ecosystem degradation, now the pandemic, disasters, extreme weather events. The list is long. As human beings and as the most intelligent species on Earth, how can we protect the planet better through innovative technology applications? Over to you, Dr. Mukai. Dr. Mukai, we are unable to hear you. Could you release the microphone, the red icon in the lower part of the screen?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you very well now.
Okay. It sounds like I'm still in space. But anyhow, thank you, Ms. Tiziana Bonapace. As an answer to the question, protection of our home planet by technologies is what I would like to talk about in my presentation today. So first slide, you can see it. So distinguished delegates, good afternoon. COVID-19 pandemic makes us realize how fast the virus spreads all over the world through our activities and globalization. Our ecosystem is borderless, and our home planet has become less resilient due to many possible causes. I flew in space in 1994 and 1998. By watching from space, our home planet is magnificent, beautiful, and giving us its natural resources for diverse living organisms on the Earth. By watching from space, at the same time, oh, could you just go back to the second one? I'm still in the second one. By watching from space, at the same time, I have realized that its natural resources, including air and water, is limited. Our Earth is fragile, and the ecosystem is borderless. With our intelligence and our teamwork as inhabitants of our planet, we must work harder to sustain our precious environment to live. This awareness is what I learned from space flight experience. Next slide, please. Next one. Next slide, please. As you know, space activities contribute to Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, defined by UN in many ways. Technologies derived from and supporting to space exploration make our regional distance closer, connect people easier, and unite our diversity stronger by teaching each other from the differences. Next slide, please. Next one, please. I'd like to present some examples of space technologies for Earth's benefits. In field of satellites is being used to protect against infectious diseases and also our health from air pollution. Talking about the space exploration, telecommunication is essential. So telescience, teleeducation, we daily use, and space medicine as preventive medicine, which supports International Space Station and future to Moon and Mars human exploration. Many spin-offs from life on Earth expected. If we just talk about the technology for space habitations, energy, water, and air, food, we need wherever we live. So utilization of limited resources, such as 3Rs, reduce, reuse, recycle, that kind of concept is promoted. Next slide, please. A little bit more detail. JAXA recent joint work with WHO in the area of polio eradication. Poliovirus spreads via contaminated water. JAXA used satellite data and digital elevation models to create maps for the area in which are difficult to access from the ground. Precise global 3D base map identifies the flow of water. WHO uses the technology to specify locations efficiently to collect the sewage sample for virus detection in Niger, Africa. Next slide, please. PM 2.5, next. PM 2.5, fine particles, hotspot for fire to produce smoke, can be detected by Japanese meteorological satellite nicknamed Himawari. We can estimate when, where, and how haze migrates. Alert can be given to local citizens. Next one, please. Next slide. In case of International Space Station, it offers us the new knowledge of and approaches to science, education, technology, and medical support. Many spin-offs expected. Next slide, please. Next slide. Space medicine and space life science enables human space exploration. Space medicine is a preventive medicine, thus it will contribute to create a better society by helping people not to become diseases, by educating people on a healthy lifestyle, and by promoting welfare. The slide explains health practices in space that could be applied to life on Earth. left column lists the measures in preventive medicine in space, such as physiological countermeasures, psychological support, telemedicine, space food development in nutrition, and healthcare. The right column represents application of space medicine to life on Earth. This area includes preventive medicine, mental health, medical care, food safety, and occupational medicine. Next slide, please. Let's talk about the technology for space habitation. Next slide. Natural resources the Earth gives us is very limited. So, through advancing the space habitation research, utilizing of the limited resources will be promoted. The last slide, please. Next one. Next slide, please. This is my last slide. So, in conclusion, I really would like to emphasize that awareness on our fragile home planet is very important. Our challenge is to fight with the common enemy of humanity, like global warming and pandemic infectious diseases, which endanger our lives in home planet. By the wisdom and the state-of-the-art technologies, we have so many possible ways to fight with these common enemies. I strongly believe that space activities contribute to make our world sustainable for the generation to come. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mukai, for sharing deep insights with us. Your message has given us a hope that science and innovations from space can lead to significant spin-off benefits for a better life on Earth. And your message is also clearly warning us about the fragilities of the planet and how evident they are from outer space. So we need to work together, and through space science, we can become united on Earth and find common solutions and innovative solutions to our problems. So I'd now like to move on to the next speaker on our panel, the Honorable Minister for Communications, Science and Technology of the Maldives, His Excellency Mr. Mohammed Jamal. Honorable Minister, we were talking about the beauty of the planet seen from outer space, and I think the Maldives is ground testament of real beauty. And the Maldives has also benefited from its integration into the high-end tourism value chain, and it has done so in a sustainable way. And as former Deputy Minister of Tourism, you can certainly take credit for the success of this model. Now, with the pandemic-induced collapse of the tourism market, what technology innovation will help the Maldives diversify its economy and achieve sustainable development? And how has the Maldives, as an archipelago nation with atolls scattered across a very wide geographic area, been addressing the digital divide? Over to you, Mr. Jamal.
And ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I would like to say that, as you introduced, Maldives is a beautiful country. We have been welcoming millions of tourists mainly from Europe, China, Asia, and from all over the world. It is unbelievable that we have to face this pandemic. We have to shut down our main airport. We have to close down all our world-class lovely resorts. We have to send back a lot of our staff to their home islands. It's unprecedented. We never thought that it would happen. For me, having worked at the Ministry of Tourism and also to promote Maldives as a destination, which is very close to my heart, I never came across that we might have to face a day like this. But that is today's reality. As you have to mention, I think being a small island nation, a lot of people may think that the challenges that we have to face, might be simple. But I have to say that although we are a small country, although our population is less than 500,000, but the challenges that we have to address, the solutions that we have to provide are not so simple. It is proportionate to many developed world. Since the pandemic of COVID-19, we have to really rethink how we look at things, how we work, and how we live. We have been working on digitalizing our government for a long time. Since early 90s, we have embarked on ambitious plan of having a nationwide coverage, telephone coverage. Late 90s, we had formulated a strategy to provide internet to the Maldives. And from 2000 onwards, we are working on providing fiber broadband to home and also increase the mobile network coverage. I think on those fronts, we have achieved a lot. But obviously, Maldives is a small country. Maldives is a very well educated, has a very well educated population. The demand, the aspirations of our youth are very high. We need to work on the speed of the internet. We need to work on the affordability of the internet. Of course, we need to work on the aspirations of these young people, and government has been working on it. The pandemic has taught us many lessons that the government simply cannot be outdated. We cannot work on conventional technologies. We have to be updated. We have to be more open. People should be able to get government services online. I think those are some of the lessons that we have learned. And also on our agricultural sector, you may understand Maldives is a group of thousands of islands, to be particular, 1,200 islands, out of which locals live in almost 200 islands, and we have roughly over 200 resort exclusive for the tourists. But this pandemic have told us, since the transportation system is totally stopped, all the domestic airports being shut down or the transport mechanism on hold, the government cannot simply stay and look. We need to deliver our government services. So we were quick. We were quite well prepared, I would say, from the past presentations that you would understand in terms of testing. We were one of the best in South Asia region. Our honorable President Ibrahim Mohammed Solih, have been having virtual meetings daily to brief all the stakeholders. So we had teams in place where all the necessary things were discussed, and we were very proactive. So, but I think that the main challenge for us was the geographical isolation of our islands. That was in one way a benefit, one way an advantage, because living in small islands means that the connectivity to outside world, to other islands are limited. Only people can, because the transportation channel was stopped, so people were quite safe. But the cost of this stop, the cost of shutting down our international airport, the cost of closing down all the resorts made it very difficult to sustain the economy. As you may know, our tourism industry contributes almost 28% of our GDP. and it is over 60% of our total foreign receipts. So it is not simply easy for the government to keep people in isolation, keep people in quarantine, and also have lockdown over the cities. That is not an easy decision that we took, but we had to take it. I think moving forward, what we need to understand, what we need to do is embrace modern technology. I think we need to work on the agricultural sector. Precision agriculture is, of course, very important. We have 2 monsoons. Agricultural sector is having a really hard time in this pandemic, also in overall because of the monsoon and also because of availability of technology. I think moving forward, that is an area that we could work. We need to have a better, the government need to be more ready. We have to have a better e-government in place to deliver our government services. To that end, our ministry and relevant stakeholders are working a lot. One of the things that we learn from, I think, the developed world is that we can indeed practice work from home, but being a small island nation in the Asia, we need to establish this mechanism which can be more practical. We understood that we have to teach, and also there's a learning curve. One thing is, of course, the digital divide. The issue was less a problem in capital Mali, but moving ahead, in other atolls, it is also a challenge. So we, as a government, we are working very hard to minimize the digital divide. I would like to note that 75% of our population has access to fiber to home. We have over 50% digital connectivity in access to internet. We have in the past conducted very successful campaigns of making people aware to internet, how to use it. I think in that end, we are leading in Asia region. I think, some of the question could be answered at a later stage, but I would like to note that this is an important beginning. We would like to work, we would like to collaborate better with UN ESCAPE, and to that end, I would like to thank Ms. Amida for her cooperation. We have already established a working model with our Common Secretary and also our staff. We would like to be part of the South Asia corridor. We would like to increase diversity of international submarine cable systems that are landing in Maldives. I think all these things will prepare the government and the people for the generation post-COVID era. With that, I would like to end my remark, and I would like to once again thank UN ESCAPE and organizer for giving us this opportunity. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister, for sharing those very important experiences. And in particular, I note the emphasis that you put on the role of government policy leadership in bridging the digital divide and in transforming societies to the digital societies of the future. The rollout of your fiber optic cable, fiber to the home, fiber that interconnects islands is certainly very impressive and a key reason for your uptake of digital technology in the Maldives. And the aspirations of the youth, I think that is something, meeting those aspirations, I think that is really key for achieving the future we want. And it is, I think, a balancing act sometimes between meeting the aspirations and being realistic. And it's not always easy to achieve that balance. But thank you so much in particular for stressing the important role of government policy leadership. And now, having heard from the government and having heard from a space leader, I'd like to now move on to the private sector. In the ICT sector, sometimes I think in the past, the private sector was so dynamic, was doing so much, and so a lot got left to the private sector to do. But as, we learn from the past, I think we are now beginning to rebalance the relationship between the government, the private sector, and the civil society. I think we are now in a much more multi-sector discussion. And so I'd like to now turn my next question to the former US Ambassador, Ted Osius, who is also the Vice President for Government Affairs and Public Policy Asia Pacific from Google. Ambassador, as we build back better in the post-COVID era, it is now clear that digitalization is going to play a critical role in economic recovery, in restoring economic growth. What is necessary to ensure that digitally driven growth is inclusive? And what is the role and how can an international technology platform like Google contribute to this? And in particular, you may also want to address this issue of meeting the aspirations of the youth. The youth are our most digitalized segment of the age spectrum, and so meeting their aspirations is important. Over to you, Ambassador.
Madam Executive Secretary Alice Chavana, Mr. Minister, Under Secretary, ladies and gentlemen, thank you to ESCAP for hosting these important regional conversations at this critical time. COVID-19 has changed our lives forever, and it has brought profound challenges to the Asia Pacific. We just heard Minister Jamal speak very powerfully about this. Our thoughts are with all of those who are affected across the region. And I think it's appropriate that the first topic chosen for these conversations is about accelerating digital connectivity, which is critical to our collective efforts to recover from this deeply challenging pandemic. One of the ways that COVID-19 has changed our lives is the very rapid digitalization of our society and our economy. And much of this transformation was already underway, but COVID has accelerated it. This is a challenge, but it's also an opportunity. In fact, it is an essential foundation of our post-COVID recovery. Please move to the next slide, if you would. And I'm going to speak a little bit about the role of digital technology in a post-COVID economic recovery. And let me start with a story. Krishna Tassels, and you're looking at a photo, is an ornamental tassels company that's based in Bangalore. They provide modern, fashionable tassel designs for saris. It's a typical Asia-Pacific small business led by a husband and wife from India, Raghu and Amita. When the pandemic hit their operations, Krishna developed a new kind of lace that customers can stitch themselves, then uploaded YouTube tutorials to show them what to do, keeping their sales up and building a sense of community at the same time. And all around the Asia Pacific, entrepreneurs are finding new ways to use online platforms to connect with their customers and to keep their businesses running. The same is true of the billions of consumers in this region. 75% of people using digital channels for the first time during the COVID pandemic will continue to use them. Before the pandemic, we may have spoken about the digital economy, and now the entire economy is digitalizing. Small businesses can make use of cloud technology to scale without needing to buy servers. They can take advantage of world-class artificial intelligence that is embedded in online platforms to analyze data, to pick trends, to improve productivity, and to reach new customers. entrepreneurs can sidestep economic intermediaries and integrate directly into the global economy. The cumulative impact of these opportunities is immense. An Oxford economics study found that small businesses in the Asia Pacific that were online were 4 times more likely to be exporting. They also found that if the number of small and medium-sized enterprises in the region online doubled, it would lead to 35 million new jobs, an additional $1.5 trillion in export sales, and an extra $1,700 on average for each worker than at a non-exporting company. You talked about young people, and digital technology can help our youngest citizens during this challenging time. UNICEF estimates that at one point, over 90% of students worldwide were impacted by school closures. Remote learning is not perfect, but it can help bridge the gap, and it may prove useful even when the classrooms reopen. So whenever possible, we're adapting our global tools and our resources to local needs, like giving 1.8 million students in the Jakarta region access to our G Suite for education tools. Please move to the next slide. Now, thank you. Madam Executive Secretary spoke about the divide and how we can address that. Well, digitally driven growth is inclusive growth. Technology can be a great leveler, provided that people have an internet connection. A budding entrepreneur in Thimphu, Bhutan, or in the Maldives has access to the same search engine, app store, or online map as an investment banker in Tokyo. A farmer in rural Vietnam has the ability to see the latest prices for her produce and adjust the prices that she charges at the market so she doesn't lose out. Online platforms have the ability to connect entrepreneurs with millions of potential customers from around the world without those entrepreneurs needing deep pockets. It is completely free to get your business showing online and on Google Maps, and it can cost just a few dollars to start serving targeted ads both at home and in export markets. This leveling especially benefits female entrepreneurs who are often underrepresented in more traditional industry structures. Could I have the last slide, please? I'm going to speak briefly about the role of Google. We are committed to playing our part in helping the Asia Pacific's many talented entrepreneurs and citizens use digital tools to adjust and succeed as Asia's economies reopen. At the same time, we want to partner with governments as we work through the digital transformation of our societies and our economies. We want to work together to help Asia rebuild for the longer-term challenges that the pandemic has brought about. In addition to our efforts in health and education, we're focusing our COVID-19 recovery efforts in 3 economic areas. And Madam Executive Secretary, I hope this is a response to the challenge that you raised. We're providing direct support. We're giving the Asia Pacific small businesses ad credits and other forms of support as part of a $150 million commitment to the region. In the area of digital skills, after moving our Grow with Google digital training courses online early this year, the number of people taking the courses soared, including a 300% increase in Australia alone. And finally, inclusive recovery. A couple of months ago, backed by funding from google.org and support from ASEAN, the Asia Foundation announced a new grassroots program that will bring skills training to 200,000 people in marginalized communities across Southeast Asia. Thank you again for asking me to participate. Thank you for your attention, and I look forward to the remaining discussions.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for those very interesting examples of how the private sector is contributing to digitally driven growth, which, as you said, is or can be inclusive economic growth, because technology is the equalizer. And we also took good note of the direct support that Google is providing to the business sector, in particular to the small and medium scale entrepreneurs through building digital skills. And we also took good note of the dynamism that is inherent in the small and medium scale business sector. So with that, I'd like to then move on to the next speaker, who is also from the private sector. And that is Mr. Sami Farhad, Senior Director of the Globalization Office from the Alibaba Group. And Mr. Farhad also served on the UN Digital Cooperation Task Force. Mr. Farhad, how could the public-private partnerships through e-commerce be further strengthened for enhanced societal well-being? Over to you, Mr. Farhad.
Thank you very much for this opportunity to participate in today's session. Your Excellency, Undersecretary General, Minister, distinguished guests, dear friends. I've been to UNESCAP many times, and it's unfortunate I'm unable to go in person today, but I'm very delighted to have this opportunity. And particularly, as was referenced, had the great fortune of cooperating quite closely with Undersecretary General Fabrizio Hochschild on the UN's high-level panel on digital cooperation, and have immense respect for the work that the UN is doing in this regard. As we all know, this is very challenging work and a very challenging period. I wanted to speak today, really given the immense diversity that exists in Asia. I wanted to speak really at the level of a few key concepts, rather than really getting into details of Alibaba business or this and that, but at the same time to be responsive to this very important question of public-private partnership and e-commerce. And so let me first make a general comment that when I think of partnership, I think of multiple parties coming together, really trusting one another, agreeing on shared objectives, sharing information, and then over time cooperating to move forward towards achieving those objectives. If that's the way we think of partnership, I would venture to say that sustained public-private partnership at that level of really trust is perhaps, like a lot of trust-related issues worldwide, somewhat lacking. Perhaps, as was referenced, I think earlier by the moderator, in the past several years, perhaps the private sector has been so busy with developing technology, applying technology, and the governments of different countries have faced so many of their own challenges that these two ships have perhaps been passing in the night with not enough partnership. So I think my first point would be that there's a real need for increased partnership, long-term trust building, cooperation, and this is not only with regards to the aftermath of COVID, but more generally. If I could have the next slide, please. Now turning to e-commerce, I think one really fundamental question is what is e-commerce? I'll let you know I only have 2 slides, so not to worry. So what is e-commerce? Is e-commerce really that there's a process of production and distribution, perhaps from a factory or from a farm, to a wholesaler, to a distributor, to a retailer, and then at the end, e-commerce simply means is that retailer operating a physical store or an online store? Is that what we mean by e-commerce? Does e-commerce only come into play in that scenario? What if the digital component is in the middle of the chain? So between the farm is an online process, and then eventually there's distribution to a physical retailer. What if the retailer has both offline and online operations? And so what I would suggest is that what we're seeing, I think, worldwide, and I think many of our distinguished panelists know the technology much better than I do, what we're seeing is rapid technological change, new business models, and really the key technologies are, immensely advancing computing power, storage ability, big data analytics ability, artificial intelligence, mobile computing power. And all of these are becoming much more inexpensive at the same time as they become increasingly powerful. So what that means is what we're seeing over time is that as software tools using these underlying technologies become applicable or become used in more and more commercial settings, what we're seeing is that in fact the digital economy is becoming the entire economy. What that means is that the entire economy is over time becoming digitalized. So if this is the framework, it's not only true for domestic economy. As we know, in the vast majority of countries, most commerce is domestic commerce. It doesn't have a foreign located buyer or a foreign located seller. But actually the same trends are also true with respect to cross-border trade. So what we see is cross-border e-commerce is just becoming trade. So that's the context I would set. There are many examples I could give. Very quick ones. On the top right, we see artificial intelligence being applied to pigs in Southwest China. So we see each pig having a unique tag, big data, able to be tracked, its productivity, its level of health, able to increase production. Bottom left, we see in Malaysia at the time of COVID, the Cameron Highlands, a very fertile area, the crops were rotting because they were used to traditional commerce. They didn't have an online channel. So local online platforms, here's a shot from Lazada, very quickly worked with the local communities to get their products online so the goods wouldn't go to waste and could reach local markets. Bottom right, what we see is the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Commerce of Thailand personally engaging in a live streaming marketing Thai fruit on an Alibaba Tmall platform. So if you look at the bottom right, the small photo, you see two Chinese hosts of the program, live streaming hosts. One is an influencer, someone akin to an Instagram celebrity. And then behind you see the Thai Deputy Prime Minister marketing the Thai fruit. So what you see are, because of COVID, but more generally, these trends of commerce becoming digitalized, all commerce becoming e-commerce, have been accelerated and really are manifesting themselves in many, many different ways according to the conditions of different countries. Next slide, please. So because this change, in my view, is so fundamental, what we really need is an entire government approach. When I think of public, in traditional development thinking, we would think of PPP. We might think of a toll road or of a particular project. But when I think of public-private partnership now, what I really mean is really multi-stakeholder coming together to think about this circle that I've drawn here. How can government really be in a learning mindset? How can the policy environment be one which is dynamic and flexible, at the same time rooted in local data, testing, learning? How can different ministries work together knowing that this digital economy is going to be the entire economy? What measures can target SMEs in the digital context, including, for example, new methods of extending credit, new methods of understanding SME needs and behavior, company formation? What measures can be used to particularly target rural dwellers or women or young entrepreneurs, going back to the youth and employment question? Turning to infrastructure, what types of infrastructure are needed? How should governments use scarce infrastructure investment amounts to really make the best use of things for their particular level of development? It's one thing to talk about access, but really we're thinking of long term. What are the steps to go from relatively little mobile broadband to more advanced mobile broadband? how does that investment relate to logistics investment, to building out inclusive financial services, things like KYC, digital ID? How are privacy concerns measured? How is cloud computing? How are computing resources available for young entrepreneurs? These are, I think, all questions. And then turning to people, thinking of youth, thinking of the demands for education, how can they be enabled to really benefit from opportunities online, with government really encouraging, while at the same time putting in place proper guardrails so that people can be motivated to learn while still having adequate protections, whether on the privacy side or other important issues. This is, in our view, we're quite optimistic, because we believe that technology does provide new opportunities, and it's really essential that the public sector and the private sector work together to develop really practical capacity building plans to move every country in the region forward. That's all I'd like to share. Appreciate everyone's time and look forward to the ongoing discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Farhad. And in particular, thank you for that emphasis on the need for sustained public, private, and people partnerships. And as the digital economy becomes the entire economy, indeed there is a need for a whole of government approach and for a multi-stakeholder engagement. And the conversation isn't always that easy, as you pointed out yourself, the trust deficit sometimes, but it is increasingly a necessity. And as a UN organization, we provide a platform that can facilitate such a dialogue and such a conversation. So our convening platform will always be available for our member states and our other stakeholders to come together and to further agree on actions to take forward in partnership with each other. So I think this issue of multi-stakeholder partnerships and cooperation, I think this leads us now well into our final speaker. We return to Mr. Fabrizio Hochschild from USG of the UN. And to Mr. Hochschild, I would like to ask the question, first is, what investments and initiatives are needed for the deployment of next generation infrastructure networks and the transformation of societies into digital societies? Over to you, Mr. Hochschild.
Finding the right response to this question is the major priority for our generation. The new technologies we have today are completely transformative. They're not like technological innovation was in the past, incremental changes. They really change every aspect of how we do business, every aspect of how we live our lives. And the problem we face today is that part of the world has made that transformation and moved on, and part has not. As the American novelist William Gibson said, the future is already here, it's just not very evenly distributed. So how do we change that? How do we respond adequately to the question you posed? I think the difficulties have been highlighted by COVID, which has both illustrated but also aggravated the consequences of the digital divide. And it's made clear that that digital divide actually threatens to undermine the realization of the Sustainable Development Goals of the 2030 Agenda. So what can we do? The Secretary General set out some ideas in a roadmap on digital cooperation, which was published in June, and I think it was formulated on the basis of unprecedented multi-stakeholder international consultations and represents a good convergence of views of how we can move forward. I think the first element we need is better international cooperation. International cooperation to allow the countries that have done this successfully nationally to pass on lessons to those who haven't yet managed nationally. And that points to the need of my second element, and that is much better capacity building efforts. There are, of course, many capacity building efforts for digital technology out there, but they're not well coordinated and they're not to scale with the problem. And they're often more supply driven than needs driven. And that brings me to a third element. We need to look comprehensively at needs. Often the challenge to securing digital transformation is not just an infrastructural one. Let me just give you one example. Even in the US, potential broadband access is far higher in percentage of people covered than actual broadband connections, which points to the fact that the existence of the infrastructure on its own is not sufficient to guarantee digital access. There are often issues around affordability. There are often issues around policy approaches, legislation, and taxation policies. So we need to look comprehensively at where the gaps are to ensuring that everyone is connected. My fourth point is that we also need something of a mindset change. I think in terms of policies and legislation, in many countries, digital infrastructure is still seen as something of a luxury. I think we have to start thinking of it much more consistently as vital infrastructure, the same way that road networks or electricity grids are considered. So it has to be treated in legislation and in taxation and in subsidy systems, not as a luxury like whiskey or cigarettes, but as an essential good like bread. And this brings me to my fifth element that I think is required, and that is a common set of standards of what we mean by affordable access. And there, I think we also may need a mindset change among business providers. At the moment, affordability is often difficult to achieve because digital technologies demand constant innovation of infrastructure. So it gets very costly. The moment we have 4G, we're rushing to 5G. The moment we have 5G, we'll rush to 6G. And apparently that's already happening. And of course, it's very difficult for countries to keep up with that. So we also need to get away from this built-in obsolescence approach and have infrastructure that is more sustainable and hence less costly. And that will make digital access more affordable. But six, of course, there will always be costs involved, and that's my sixth element. We need financing structures that bring together international, national, private sector, and public funds. And we need models of financing that can work and can identify where the gaps are biggest. And that needs new models or expanding well-functioning existing models. But I would like to stress in conclusion, what we really need is better international cooperation. And we see in some areas greater fragmentation in the digital domain, and we really need to work hard to try and overcome that if we're to make progress and to ensure that the future is there for all and not just for the few.
Thank you, Mr. Hochschild, for sharing those perspectives. I'd like to very briefly follow up with a second question. The UN Secretary General has called for universal, safe, affordable, and reliable access to the internet by 2030. What is the expectation and the role of international cooperation in achieving this goal? Over to you, Mr. Hochschild.
As I indicated in my response to the previous question, I believe international cooperation is absolutely mission critical. It's very hard to see how, without stepped up international cooperation, we won't achieve safe, affordable, and reliable access by 2030. From what I understand of speaking to ITU colleagues, if we let things drift as they're drifting now, there won't be safe, affordable access until, at the very earliest, 2040 or beyond. When we have come a long way, never has technology spread so quickly. We've now connected in barely 25 years over half the global population. And access continues to grow, even though it's at a much slower pace than it was doing over the past 5 years. There are 3.6 billion people who still remain unconnected. And those who remain unconnected are often those who are most difficult to connect and most costly to connect, and those who are often excluded from other services. So it's often the rural populations in remote areas, it's often the poor, and what I find particularly shocking with 21st century technology is that it replicates 18th century discrimination. So women are much less connected than men globally, and that trend is actually getting worse, not better. And of course, that divide between 46% of the world connected, unconnected, 54% connected, is not evenly distributed. In the 47 least developed countries, only about 20% of the people are connected. I think the first thing we need to do is make this a global priority for all, and that needs to be articulated. And it has to be a regional priority for regional organizations, and of course also at the national level. Countries have very different perceptions of what sort of priority this is for their national development systems. So I think a global articulation of this as a priority would be important. It's there in the SDGs, but I think its critical importance to the SDGs was not adequately recognized when the SDGs were formulated. And I think a new articulation of its importance for the SDGs globally would be important. Secondly, we need to improve capacity building efforts, as I mentioned before. ITU, the International Telecommunications Unit, and the UN Development Programme, UNDP, are looking at working harder together to step up capacity building from the contribution that the UN can make. But it will need much better coordinated and much scaled up capacity building across the world. But that also has to go hand in hand for wiser policies, wiser taxation, wiser public legislation, and of course, greater investment. It's inevitable. The costs are being estimated now, but to get universal connectivity will cost a very, very large amount. But none of this can be achieved without much enhanced global dialogue around this objective. I think the objective itself of universal connectivity is held by everyone, but how we achieve it will require much more proactive cooperation and understanding. And that's indeed what we're trying to promote through the Secretary General's roadmap.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hochschild. So that brings us to the end of the presentations by the statements by our panelists. And we have about we started a little late due to some technical issues, so perhaps we can continue one or 2 minutes beyond our scheduled ending. So I'd really like to open the floor and to give an opportunity for at least 1 or 2 questions. So let me start off with questions in this room, and then I will move to the questions from the chat, the social media. I recognize Kun Paramet from GISTA. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Bonapace. Dear Dr. Mukai, space technology applications are very important to sustainable development of human beings. Many young students have their dreams to explore the universe. Can you please give some advice to these young students on what should do now for future realization of their dreams? Thank you.
Thank you, Kun Paramet. So we are back to the youth. The youth is a key stakeholder in our conversation today. Dr. Mukai, over to you.
Hi, so thank you for the question. As you mentioned, younger people is our treasure for future. So I always introduce my favorite words to young people, which is, if you can dream it, you can do it. And I believe the power of education. So education enables us to envision and pursue our dreams. So my suggestion is, since life is very short, have a dreams, take challenges, and enjoy your one-time life. That's what I'm doing. Let's do it. So thank you for your question.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mukai, for those very wise words, and they are also inspiring. I think they are inspiring to the youth, they are inspiring to the middle-aged and the aging, all ages across the population. Thank you so much for that. Let me now turn to some questions from the social media platforms. Maybe I'll take the one from, let me see. I'll start off with the first one, and then let's see how we go with time. So there is a question to Google, to Ambassador Osius, and this question relates to investments and the large-scale investments which Asia Pacific will need as the digital economy becomes the economy. And the question is if you could kindly give a little more details of how Google is contributing to this. Over to you, Ambassador.
Ambassador, your microphone is off.
Sorry. Thank you, Madam Executive Secretary. I think this is also relevant as a follow-up to what Undersecretary Hochschild spoke about when he spoke about the importance of access and investment. This new digital economy needs investment in both assets and in people. And as a company, we're proud to be contributing to both. Human capital is critical, but digital tools are nothing without digital skills. So for years, we've been teaching digital skills to people in the region, from digital literacy to learning how to get their small businesses online. For example, Google has pledged to train 3 million employees of small and medium-sized enterprises throughout the ASEAN region in digital skills by the end of this year. And since 2015, we've trained 50 million people in the Asia Pacific through Grow with Google. We're ready to expand that commitment. We're ready to make our programs part of bigger economic recovery plans across the region. For instance, we're working directly with the government of Korea to expand a digital skills program for developers. You may, and with regard to investing in assets, you may have heard about Google's landmark $10 billion investment commitment to India through the India Digitization Fund. And that includes a direct investment, $4.5 billion investment in Reliance Jio platforms to jointly develop entry-level affordable smartphones for the Aam Admi, if you will. we're also playing our part in investing in physical assets to bring access to more people and to make it more affordable. Now, the Undersecretary spoke about this. Network infrastructure is a critical link in the delivery of the internet to consumers and businesses around the world, supporting digital transformation. And Google has invested billions of dollars globally in submarine cables, in data centers, and in other components of digital infrastructure. These kinds of investments help increase the speed and reduce the cost of bandwidth in the Asia Pacific, as well as improving the resilience, the reliability, and the performance of networks. And this helps people in the region get a better experience in important applications such as we're using now, video conferencing, cloud services, and even digital payments, which are very important to people who don't have access to traditional banking services. Our investments support 1.1 million additional jobs and $430 billion in additional GDP for the region, and they help small and large businesses in the region make the most of our digital future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. I have a number of other questions that we have received, and many of them are addressed to other panelists. But unfortunately, we've run out of time. We have another meeting starting at 2 p.m. and we need to start that meeting as punctually as possible. So it's with real regret that I am going to close the discussion at this point. I would have loved to have stayed on for many more hours. I think it's been fascinating. It's been very broad and diverse, and it has really shown the dynamism and the multiple interests that the digital economy presents across the spectrum, and then the multiple applications that can come out of science and innovation for the future we want. So I'm going to close it here. Just wish to express a very sincere thanks to all our distinguished panelists for very generously sharing with us your insights. And before I hand it over to Ms. Armida Alice Chabana for the closing remarks, I would like us to, as a souvenir, to just take a group photo. So I'd like to ask all the speakers to turn on their microphone, to turn on the camera, and we will take the group photo, and then I will hand it to our Executive Secretary.
Honorable Minister, would you please turn on your camera?
Are we done? Yeah. Okay, I think we are done. Executive Secretary, over to you.
Thank you very much, Tiziana. Again, first of all, I would like to express my sincere appreciation and thanks to all the excellent, distinguished panelists. Dr. Mukai Chiaki, His Excellency Mr. Muhammad Jamal, Ambassador Ted Osius, Mr. Sami Farhat, and my colleague Fabrizio Hoschel, for the excellent presentation, excellent insights, I cannot summarize enough here, but let me just to give a quick, several key takeaways from Dr. Chiaki Mukai. Again, we learned so much from your presentation, although very brief, but you open up the horizon of the opportunities, potentials further to leverage this space, technology space application to support sustainable development. Space activities that I take note of, many that you give great example. And second is, which is very interesting, technology for space habitation. Again, this is something we thought very distant in the future, but maybe not. Again, if we see the challenges of that we are facing, climate change and so on, that the second technology for space habitation is something really interesting, as well as the space activities, space-related activities that contribute directly to sustainable development. From His Excellency Minister, again, from the experience and also the leadership of your government and how to quickly turn around, to mitigate the impact of socioeconomic impact of COVID-19, as well as efforts to diversify the economy, but at the same time also how to transform the economy, modernizing the economy with technology and certainly with IT, ICT. Again, there is this ample potentials. We understand, no country can do it alone. Nobody can do it alone, especially to come out of this crisis. So therefore, again, these potentials of collaboration among member states, as well as across the stakeholders. And from our colleagues from private sector, Ambassador Ted Osius from Google, as well as Mr. Sami Farhad from Alibaba, you've given great examples, concrete, ongoing. Again, but basically, providing the platform for international collaboration, as well as providing this direct support at the same time, especially to the segment of the society that with this growing aspiration, but not only aspiration, but this is the future, actually, which is our youth. And many examples, great examples, but basically not only the entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs is from the production side, from the supply side, but as well as from the demand side. So let us not forget also the demand side. Because what we see with COVID-19, the restriction in movement, so basically the collapse is the demand side. So when we would like to re-energize again the economy, so one big homework is actually how to revive the demand side as well. But then this, again, we see the great potentials of this digital economy, digitalization, that can bridge this demand and supply. But again, the question is how to accelerate the transformation. Many speakers alluded on this, the need to accelerate the transformation of this digitalization, because at the end of the day, basically the entire economy is now is becoming more and more digitalized. And again, of course, from my colleague, which basically a UN Secretary General initiative with a UN roadmap for digital cooperation, which lays the framework for cooperation and the key elements of the cooperation and how to take the cooperation forward from the capacity building, the emphasis on capacity building, the comprehensive digital transformation, the mindset change, very important. Again, if we want to digitalize the economy, we want to accelerate digitalization in the education sector. One element very important is digital literacy and also the change in the mindset. Financing, for sure, but financing then, this is also the ample opportunities to have this PPP sort of collaboration. So with that, again, I would like, again, one more time to sincerely express our appreciation and thanks to all distinguished speakers as well as to all of you viewers. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Alice Jabana. And so that brings us to the end of the first conversation in the series of Building Back Better. Thank you once again to everyone. Stay healthy, and we hope to see you at our next event of the Regional Conversation Series on Building Back Better. Bye-bye.